All right, this is Bradley Meyer with the DePIN Connection. Today, we are joined by the founder of Geodnet, Mike Horton. Mike, thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me, Bradley.
Absolutely. Like Geodnet, obviously, for people watching, if you have watched my channel, I'm a huge fan of this project and the things they're doing, both on the supply and the demand side. And we're going to touch on all that today. But to get things kicked off, Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what you did leading up to Geodnet?
Sounds great. My background's technical. I've been in the field of positioning, robotics, localization, as it's called, my whole career. I went to UC Berkeley, got a degree in electrical engineering, and started off on developing MEMS-based accelerometers and gyros for navigation. Pioneered that field, created a lot of products that are used in farming and in drones and even into automotive applications today. Sold the business in 2011 for almost 50 million, 32 million. Let's see, it was 32 million plus 18, so about 50 million in two pieces. One piece to aerospace company called Moog that took over the sort of aerospace and defense side of our business, and another part to a company in Asia that was a pure semiconductor company. And that was sort of my background in learning about inertial navigation, GPS-based navigation. And then I met up with my co-founder, Dr. Yudan Yi, who's a PhD in geodesy, and he introduced me to the whole field of RTK and the combination of RTK plus sensor fusion for more precise navigation. We started working together and trying to figure out how to scale that solution to something that could get even into consumer products. And that's when we realized that blockchain could really make that happen, which I'm sure we'll talk about today. And that led us to meet our third co-founder, David Chen, who's a real OG in crypto himself. He built one of the first terahash Bitcoin mining ASICs on a team that did that, a team that developed the first L1, public L1 in China. So he's been around in developing blockchain-based technology for over a decade. And the three of us started Geodnet together.
Well, I can see how that background, how your background coincides with what you're doing with Geodnet for sure. And we'll touch on some of the verticals you're moving into as far as revenue goes. So, how did you guys land on the DePIN space though, specifically?
If you go back to what I was saying, so Dan and I were looking at, we had realized the cost of the hardware for doing this precise GPS-based location called RTK. It's kind of a next generation GPS that really is at the heart of Geodnet, that the cost of that was just going down really fast, that you could build a product like any sort of consumer product and put centimeter accurate positioning into that product. But to do that, you needed to scale out a network of reference stations. And we thought, well, the hardware has gotten a lot less expensive, so let's go out and rent storage locations, or we'll talk to American Tower, and it won't be that expensive. We'll raise some money from a VC and we'll be able to spread out thousands of base stations and build this huge global network. And we quickly realized that no, that's going to take billions, if not tens of billions of dollars in many years to get done. Even if you had all that money, it would take many, many years because it's really difficult to deploy hardware at physical locations quickly and cost effectively. You go to these places and then be like, oh, we need permanent drawings. We need to bring in a city inspector, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, this is your business selling rooftop space. Well, it's still very complicated, very expensive. Pull your own internet, blah, blah, blah. And we're like, well, shit, our idea, I don't know how this is going to work. And then we saw Helium. And we saw what they were doing with the IoT network at the time, and that was scaling really beautifully to a level way beyond what we needed. I mean, we wanted to put up 10,000 stations, something like this, to build a really incredible RTK network. And they were already at the time, I think 20,000 nodes, and you can see their trajectory. They were on that growth path where they ended up ultimately getting to 1 million online nodes at one point. And we said, hey, our device is not that different than a Helium. You need to get it up on the roof. It's a little bit harder. You can't ever do it indoors. It's a bit more of an installation, has a few more things to it that are required, but overall it's very similar. So let's try that. And that's kind of what led us to meet David. And we started off in that direction, that sort of the tail end of the last bull market in crypto and got a very good start to building up the network and realized that this was the way to do it. And at this point now, on the supply side, we've grown to the world's largest network in just under 2 years. And we've passed the largest networks run by, multi-billion dollar, $10 billion plus Web 2 companies. We passed them by thousands of stations, and we've done that in a period of 2 years. Wow. So I think the success in building out the supply side has been really remarkable, and it's now providing coverage to the vast majority of the United States, and the vast majority of the EU is perfectly covered with Geodnet already today. So it's been an amazing way to go. DePIN has been just absolute dynamite for our business.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I think a lot of the DePIN projects that we're seeing right now drew inspiration from Helium. Helium pioneered to the extent that I think we saw what was capable or what was possible as far as deployments, right, and building out a decentralized network. So I'm not surprised that Helium was part of your inspiration in going the DePIN route. And yeah, it's remarkable. I think we're coming up on 8,400 base stations now. And like you're growing it between 1 and 200 a week, I think.
Yeah, it's super. And a lot of stations are being used every day. I don't have a number for you on how many, but we're getting people using the network just constantly. And it's working very, very well. I think we learned a few things from the first DePIN projects like Helium about, putting in place a lot of focus on quality control and high quality supply side being really the key. And so when you go out to use the network, it just works. And actually, because the station density is very high in urban areas, it's quite a bit better than any alternative out there. So I always, look at what we're doing compared to other networks that are available and have been built. And we really have the best quality, the best coverage, and the best pricing by a margin in almost every region we compete in. So this is really the outcome of the DePIN model has produced an incredibly good product.
That's amazing. And it is being used. So just for people that are watching that aren't super familiar with Geodnet, when you're looking for, or you're getting location data, right? There's global satellite systems called GNSS. And, when you're using GPS on your phone, for example, and GPS is one of those GNSS stations, the US version of that. And you triangulate your position by connecting to, I believe it's 3 or 4 satellites, right? In one of those GNSS systems.
Minimum 3 or 4 satellites.
Okay, minimum. So, and you can only get within generally a couple meters of accuracy, which is fine for some use cases, but using this RTK technology, real-time kinematics, you can get centimeter level accuracy. And there are some use cases that you really need that level of accuracy. We're going to talk about some of those use cases in this interview. But yeah, getting to 8,400 base stations. And I'd say the one thing that really struck me, though, was that you guys incorporated an incentive structure, basically, so that people deployed these stations. It was done in a way that the station provided value. And that's one of the things we saw with Helium is that, they got to a point where they had nearly 1 million IoT hotspots deployed, but a lot of them were on top of each other and really weren't providing a ton of value. Well, I'd love for you to speak to, the system that you employed to really incentivize people to have them spread out so that you had good coverage, but also so that each base station did truly provide value.
Yeah, I think that one of the big challenges in Helium is that it's hard to know for the network, the protocol, to really validate how good the quality, the coverage of the DY node is. And it's a much trickier problem than what we face. We can tell from the data, which is signed by a crypto chip, and we have other anti-spoofing techniques in the network that are in our white paper. We can tell with 100% certainty what the quality of the data is. So we can assign rewards based on the quality of the data. And then we know where the station is because, well, it's GNSS. That's what it does. And in fact, the service that is used to kind of compute base station coordinates, which is part of the overall workflow for RTK, I mean, it ends up knowing where that station is to millimeter accuracy. So we really know where these things are, and that allows us to really crisply allocate token rewards to provide uniform high quality coverage. See the data quality, see the online time, see the station stability, the multipath metrics. That's all tracked by the network. So we know that the node is providing high quality data that customers can count on.
I'm going to throw this on here so you can kind of see. Obviously, we're coming up on 8,400 miners. I mean, you mentioned when you set out to do this, you were looking at deploying 10,000. So we're already getting close to that. And then on the map here, you can see, I mean, y'all have amazing coverage in really all across the world.
Yeah, but can you dial up rtk.geodnet.com? This map is sort of when you're using the network, what you want to think about. And on the left-hand side, you see the accuracy level achievable in a given area. So the light green is 10 centimeter and the dark green is 2 centimeter. And if you zoom in, you can see where we have gaps from a service point of view and where we have it. If you go over and take a look at Europe, for example, you can see very few places where you can't at least achieve a 10 centimeter accuracy. So this is what our users think about. This is what they want. This is what they would like to eventually see, all ideally perfectly dark green, although a whole lot of the applications can work with the 10 centimeter accuracy. 0.1 meters is certainly for many autonomous applications, drone applications is good enough. But there are applications in survey and in classical construction type of applications where 10 centimeters isn't good enough and you do need single digit centimeters. So dark green, almost every major city that you can think of has dark green coverage. And that means that in those environments, you can get reliable 2 centimeter accuracy. So our initial stated goal in the white paper is actually to achieve 100,000 stations. And that includes coverage of all of Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, really everywhere that's legal to operate RTK completely. For, I think, the customers that are most monetizable in the next 1 to 2 years, I think 10,000 is a very good target that would satisfy 70-80% of the market. 20,000 probably serve 95% of the market. 100,000 the long-term goal, so that the network can provide this kind of high-end, high-performance accuracy really to every person on the planet.
Obviously, it's working. I mean, you have good enough coverage to have a lot of revenue coming through the door. Before we touch on that, one of the things we see with DePIN is there's a lot of fluctuations when it comes to people ordering equipment, and market conditions can have an impact on that for sure. One of the things, though, to your benefit, I would say, is that you don't need 1 million base stations deployed, right? You already have really good coverage, and 10,000 will get you to that point that you're looking to achieve in the shorter term for sure. As far as like from a supplier standpoint, though, how do you deal with those fluctuations? Because sometimes you'll have wait times. Are you looking at adding additional suppliers, or you feel pretty good and pretty set with your current supply chain?
Yeah, we try to manage into a really reasonable range. And although in the past few months, lead times got a little bit longer than we would like, those are coming down now as the market's gotten a bit more volatile and we've caught up on things. I think it's very important to manage it tightly. I think it hurts everyone in the ecosystem when there are supply shortages that are severe. And it obviously hurts everyone in the marketplace when there's a bunch of equipment sitting on eBay in boxes wanting to be sold for pennies on the dollar. So it's an important thing to really keep your eye on and to work with your partners in your ecosystem. So we have multiple distributors, and we've worked with one supplier primarily to develop the hardware, but we've engaged discussions with other folks on it, and we're looking at more of those opportunities. There'll be some things coming out in that regard, but overall, it does have to be managed carefully. And I think that really the supply shortage is something that must be avoided. I think it's actually quite dangerous for the overall community and project health when things get really wacky. It creates a lot of unusual or adverse behaviors. And then obviously, and nobody likes the scenario where there's a bunch of hardware sitting around that's unsold and maybe becoming outdated in some sense. That's not great either.
So when we talk about supply, by the way, I'm talking about deployers, people building out the infrastructure. On demand, we're talking about people using the network and actual revenue coming into the project. So shifting over to the demand side, because we've seen a lot of DePIN projects. They've been able to build up the supply side using a token incentive model, but we have not seen many DePIN projects crack the code, if you will, when it comes to driving revenue. And this is something that you guys have done really, really well. And I really want to dig into that, because I think for this sector, for DePIN to really work and have sustainable projects, there has to be revenue. And it's something that again, I think a lot of other projects can look at Geodnet and kind of learn from you guys. So first, let's look at the, let's see here, the console. I mean, we're seeing real revenue coming in, not just revenue, but it's trending up every month. Okay. And that's exactly the type of trend you want to see. And this is on their console page. I would assume, and I've worked in the startup space, that you probably started off with some proof of concepts and some smaller deals that you're expecting to turn into bigger contracts and longer term deals. So I'd imagine we'll continue to see this trend going in the right direction. And I know you've been out hitting the pavement and are meeting with prospective customers all the time. But what do you attribute your success to as far as getting so much usage on the network?
I think the timing of Geodnet's introduction to the market was very good. And that is, as I sort of mentioned in the precursor, the cost of high precision hardware is falling very quickly, which is driving demand for the need for the correction service. And more, the use of high precision location technology is getting introduced into more and more workflows around things like drones and robotics, autonomy, AI-based equipment. Those all would like to have spatial context that is much more precise than 2, 3, and sometimes 10, 20, sometimes even 100 meters, depending on the environment, that only GPS only can provide. So that I think is really the core of it. And then the second piece I'd say that's been very helpful in our industry, and this is not Geodnet specific, but it is GNSS and positioning specific. The standards are very strong. So the data formats for delivery of the correction service is entirely standardized. It's a mature standard. We adhere to that standard, and as such, the switching cost and the cost to try our service for a customer that's already been in the RTK field for many years is very low. And that when they then are able to try it for basically for 5 minutes of effort to try Geodnet, and then it works, and they see that it works well, and then they see that they can do things with this network, such as add coverage to it in areas that maybe their existing supplier doesn't have, or they can even make money from adding coverage. It's just very attractive. It's very attractive. And so as a result, we're able to attract customers very, very easily. The standardization helps tremendously. I think if you contrast that with LoRa, which is LoRaWAN, which is the original Helium IoT, which I love as a technology, and we will do things with that. The standards there are not as strong and mature. There isn't such a huge track record of the standardization there. A lot of the use cases are also within one facility. They're not sort of open network use cases, whereas GNSS, it's typically things that are moving, right? You're tracking location. So there's an inherent need for geographic coverage that a network provides. So I think the need is clearly there. There's a good, strong existing market that spends a ton of money. The prices in the existing market are high universally, from the United States to Europe to even countries like India. To what extent that there is an existing supplier, it's expensive. It's expensive. It's needed. Standards are strong. Geodnet addresses all of these things. We follow the standards, we have the high quality product, and the cost is very affordable.
I worked in the drone service space in a prior life. So obviously, when I came across Geonet, I was like, okay, this definitely resonates with me. I understand that sector, but I guess in the short term, and right now with your current client base, and I do want to talk about a few of those clients, so we can talk about some real world examples. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for revenue? Which sectors? And then, looking further out, where do you see that evolving?
Yeah, revenue is pretty diversified across a number of applications, and I see a lot of growth in all of them. I think if you start off with the most classic application that sort of has driven the initial technology development, even though it's expensive and hard, construction, machine control, and civil survey, we're doing well in those spaces. We have surveyors signing up and using the network pretty much daily. Bigger firms starting to standardize on it, switching over their operations to it. So that's the very most kind of classical, old school, if you will, marketplace for a high precision location. And then you go to another, sector, something like IoT robotics, robotic mowers, small delivery robots. These types of platforms also have been extremely attracted to our platform and been signing up to use the network, and a number of really important relationships that have been building up there, some of which we can talk about today, obviously, and others that will be, coming out in the relatively near future. So I think it's pretty broad based. Ag is another great market for us. We're working with a few people. Automotive, I think automotive is a big long-term potential, but it's slower moving. So I think that it's going to take a few years to just for any new thing to get into automotive. You can expect 3 to 5 year design cycle for it. It's just not an industry that can bring in new technology into products that fast, but it's a big opportunity. And the cool thing about it is we can get into some of those earlier through partners that are already in the automotive space. And then finally, mobile phone usage is one that we're real excited about. We're doing a lot of technology development for a mobile SDK to allow people to build apps on top of Geodnet on the phone and take advantage of high accuracy, better than what is natively available on the phone accuracy from the Geodnet network.
Wow. Okay, that would be a massive market. One of the problems that a lot of DePIN projects have had really is getting Web 2 customers to use their network and remove that friction, because being in crypto, sometimes Web 2 still looks at I think crypto in a certain light. So how have you been able to effectively remove that friction and bring Web 2 customers into your ecosystem?
So we go to where they are. And we make the service easy for them to use, and we don't overly emphasize the crypto side of it. Although many of the Web 2 customers do have an interest in that, and we're certainly share that openly with them and encourage them to participate. It's clear from our website how we do it, but it's not the selling point. And we go to the major exhibitions that are relevant to each of the sectors in our field. We engage with customers like any normal Web 2 business would do. We obviously start with proof of concept, and then they start and roll out with maybe a subset of their customers or products and grow it step by step. We focus, again, providing good technical support, API documentation, all the things that are needed to make sure that they're successful. I think that because the existing solutions aren't that great, that helps a lot. I think if you were to enter in with a DePIN backed offering into a market that didn't have any problems, and this is really true of any startup, if you come into a market that really is mature and everything is working perfectly and is very commoditized, it's going to be a tough go. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the timing is very good for Geodnet, as there's a lot of new opportunities for using high precision location in these more AI-driven products. And we provide a solution that is really superior to the existing solutions and more practical in many ways than the existing solutions. And so that brings people in the door.
And as you mentioned earlier, I mean, you are the largest now RTK network. So having that ubiquitous coverage is a huge point as well, I would say.
So coverage is, there's coverage, there's quality, and there's cost. And definitely coverage is one of the most fundamental, if not probably the most fundamentally important metric for us.
Let's talk about some of those partners that you have. So this was, you put this out, I guess, back in June. So I'd love to cover at least a few of these to talk about some of the real world usage that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, so we've been adding customers very steadily to the network, and we took a minute to put together a press release with 5 of them that wanted to share publicly. Not every customer does want to go public, but these 5 did, and at the same time, there's a point when we had reached the 7,000 station mark. And one of the neat things about this was, again, the revenue diversity. These customers cover automotive, IoT robotics, survey, GIS, farming, and drones. And so it was an awesome opportunity to sort of show the breadth and diversity of revenue streams that Geodnet has in its portfolio. So yeah, I'd be happy to kind of jump in. BuyNav is a great partner that is very focused on automotive. They've been a real pioneer in the development of safety critical positioning engines and safety critical GNSS hardware that's specifically designed for ADAS systems. These are assisted driving systems. They've taken their chipset, that is a GNSS chipset itself, through what's called ASIL certification, Automotive Safety Integrity Level. This is a functional safety standard that really proves that the silicon itself is robust to failure. And so, like, if you think about a GNSS receiver, it's tracking many satellites. What they'll do is they'll compute kind of multiple different solutions in there off of different subsets of channels, and they'll have spare channels for redundancy and compute kind of integrity scores to make sure that that position is reliable enough to make automated driving decisions. And that's their core market. To make all that work, you have to have a corrections network, and it has to be very low cost. And so BuyNav has picked us to work with, and we're out particularly in the European area with them right now as they get these boxes and chips that they design for automotive as well as robotics and going in the marketplace. If we take a look at Sensori Robotics, this is one of my favorite apps. I always talk about it a lot, which is robotic mowing. I think people if you look up how big a market landscaping services is, it'll blow your mind. And it's a kind of a dirty business today because most of them use gas powered engines. It's noisy. We all kind of hate it when the mowers are running. It's very loud and it smells, and it takes a ton of labor because grass keeps growing, right? So I think it's just I'm really fired up about it because you're basically taking a kind of difficult, nasty machine and job, replacing it with a beautiful little electric machine that can, just like your Roomba, go out there, mow a bit, come back, recharge, and mow a bit. And Sensori takes that to the professional marketplace. So their customers, Sensori Robotics, we did a video with them. They're very focused on professional landscaping firms and sort of robotics as a service business model, where they'll take a fleet out. So, 4 or 5 robots to a single job site, and they mow as a team in order to cover a large area in a pretty reasonable period of time. And then the crew that's on the site can focus on other aspects, whether it's, trimming the hedges or weed eating or other things, so that it's a kind of human robot team working together. But it needs precise location, the striping and the coverage, and getting every nook and cranny. You need that centimeter accuracy for that. So those are 2 that are pretty cool. You want to keep going, Brad, or you want to take a second to talk?
Yeah, I mean, if there's another one you want to touch on, I think it's really important because, like, it's one thing to have a network, be able to talk about the use case, but I think the more real world examples that you can show is really important, and then I will look at, I do want to talk about the tokenomics a little bit around that, and also talk about if there's any other upcoming partnerships you might be able to hint at. You might not be able to give us a lot of detail, but if you have any alpha for us.
Super. So AliNav is a great one to highlight because I think it highlights a broad trend that we're seeing. And AliNav is a maker of precision farming equipment, primarily retrofit equipment that you install onto an existing tractor to allow it to operate semi-autonomously and maybe in the future fully autonomously. That semi-autonomous operation makes it easier for the operator to operate the equipment in all kinds of conditions with less training. But most importantly, it reduces the use of input costs. So especially in operations like spraying, the overlap, when you drive manually the tractor, you will have a significant amount of overlap. And that overlap translates directly into increased chemical usage. And that costs money, real money. And so most farmers can justify a automation system over a period of time. But folks like Alinav are bringing the cost of equipment down and making the cost pay back really, really quickly, like one season type of payback for the installation of the equipment, and connecting it up to a service like Geodnet is a huge part of that. You have to have RTK in order to get the precision that you'd like. So we've seen that trend broadly. We have several other players in the marketplace now using us. And one of the really amazing things that I can announce on your podcast is that the USDA has confirmed all of this. And so the USDA itself, United States Department of Agriculture, has installed a Geodnet node and runs it in Arkansas, and has one of these retrofit systems, not an Alinav system, but another player in the marketplace that works with Geodnet. One of their retrofit systems installed on the USDA tractor, and they have been just ecstatic with the results, and they're going to be sharing that publicly in the near future. So what they say, what I learned from the USDA, is that only 1/3 of farms in the United States use precision ag equipment. I thought it was a higher penetration to that because the tech's been around for a bit. Why is it only 1/3? Cost of equipment and services and precision. And Geodnet directly addresses that. And the thought of being able to make farming easier and helping to bring these staggering food input costs down is something that's really exciting for the network. And ag is a big, big, big business, and it's everywhere, right? It's not just the US, it's Eastern Europe, Central Europe, South America, India, all over. Ag is a very global business. Everybody knows it's a very labor-intensive business. Geodnet directly helps reduce that labor cost and save input costs on chemicals and other things.
Wow. All right. That's huge. I love it. I mean, and the fact that you are hitting so many different sectors or different verticals, if you will, I think diversification is great. It really opens the door for a larger total addressable market and more revenue coming through the door. And I imagine we'll continue to see these types of announcements. I'm sure you have some stuff you can't talk about right now.
The only thing I would say that's really nice about revenue diversification is that markets do ebb and flow. It's just inevitable. Everything is cyclical. We focus a lot on that in the crypto world because it's particularly the cycles are pretty violent and particularly fast and stuff. But all markets are cyclical, and when you're dependent really on just one market for revenue, it does put an awful lot of stress. So I do think that the diversification is a very big thing for us. That's going to help the network grow. Everything needs to remain in balance, sort of maybe even segueing a bit to tokenomics. One of the key elements of tokenomics is keeping everything in balance, because when things get out of balance is when you really do see problematic market conditions emerge.
That's one of the things about DePIN that I find attractive is, for the projects that can figure out the revenue side, I think there is an opportunity to break away from the market cycle sentiment, right? Mm-hmm. And it can become self-sustained and kind of decoupled from that whole, market cycle, bull and bear market to an extent. And touching on the tokenomics, that is a good segue. You guys have implemented a burn only, right? So a lot of DePIN projects, as revenue comes in, it does result in a token burn, but most of them also have a mint to burn equilibrium where tokens will then be reintroduced to the supply. In your case, and I'm going to pull this up here, you guys are fully deflationary, and you can see it in this wallet address right here. It's all very transparent for people to see. Currently in this wallet, you guys have 6.68 million GOD tokens that have been burned from revenue to this point. So I'm curious, what made you decide to go the fully deflationary route?
Well, I think that the fully deflationary route makes a lot of sense for Geodnet because there is a finite number of stations that are finally needed. And, there's a billion tokens out there that's covering the entire, all the project's needs, from the investment to the team to the ecosystem development. So there's plenty of tokens. So we're not going to run out of tokens by making the protocol fully deflationary. I think that that's a kind of false fear in some sense, but it's particularly false for us because we're naturally constrained by the surface of the earth in terms of how many stations we need. And I think if you're looking at a protocol that has a constant refresh cycle in terms of building out infrastructure, then I think it does maybe make more sense to consider a burn to remint type of model where, yeah, the tokens are repurchased or are pulled back from the market, from the liquidity, but then also reissued back to the mining pool. But we think that that does not have the same level of power to create a positive feedback loop. It definitely kind of dampens the network flywheel. Whereas a burn, when you think about what happens when you're doing the build out, you're really trying to incentivize people to kind of build it so they will come. But once they start coming, you can start pulling back some of that incentive, and you can do that in a permanent way, right? You don't have to kind of put that back in. You can think about like subsidies to get people to sort of make a transition to EVs. You don't after those subsidies are there, you don't have to like put them back out. So, okay, now we're going to, do it again after you've gotten your tax revenue back from charging them for, I don't know, whatever it is, however the model would work. And that, I don't think you need to do that. And I think permanently reducing total supply, again, the supply is not going to go to zero. I mean, there's a billion total tokens. That's not going to happen. The market will sort itself out. The price market equilibrium will just adjust, and you'll start to see the valuation metrics related to the revenue, return on assets. All of these things will be the things that judge the value. But it does make a lot of sense. And I think you see, in a way, it's not the same analogy, but there's other comparables out there that do have a kind of deflationary aspect to them. And I think it's extremely healthy.
Well, I have to say, as a large investor myself, I love it. And I think that the deflationary tokenomics make a lot of sense. And I like that it's transparent, because, I have seen some projects where it's a little bit more difficult to track what's going on with the token burns. But the other thing with the tokenomics that I found really interesting, and when we connected at Consensus, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the unlock schedule for employees is also tied to certain milestones and, inherently the success of the project.
That's right. Yeah, the team, the founding TPAs that sort of brought in the first investment are set up on unlock milestones, and only a little of those milestones have been hit, but over time we hope to hit them all. And I think that the unlock schedule is important in the project, but not overly important. In the end, one should always assume that all the tokens will finally fully be circulating. I think that's really the way to think about, these projects.
Makes sense. Obviously, I mean, this is true of all industries, right? You have a very successful project, and there's going to be other people, not going to necessarily say ride your coattails, but there's going to be people that try to come in and become competitors. So I'd imagine that, we'll see the same thing in the DePIN space. What would you say, sets you apart from competitors that might try to enter the space and, grab market share from you?
I think that our knowledge on the Web 2 side and the deep technical knowledge of the team on all aspects of satellite navigation and localization technologies and sensor fusion is very, very strong. And that leads us to be able to work with our Web 2 customers to successfully deploy the service into a wide variety of applications. I think that's a very key aspect of what would set us apart from another DePIN project going into it. We just have a very, very strong technical team that really has deep understanding of the tech. And of course, we have a big first mover advantage in terms of getting to the scale that we have. And the first mover advantage is really important. We will be continuing to innovate on the data services that the network can provide. That is ongoing. We're going to have a lot of different data products that are really, I think, groundbreaking for high precision location beyond classic RTK. Classic RTK is super great because it's standardized and all these things we talked about, but there's many other ways to use this data for many things. And we have the technical team to deliver those data products to the marketplace.
Love it. Keeping the foot to the gas pedal. And that's super important. I mean, I worked in the tech startup space, and you have to continue to innovate and launch new solutions to stay ahead of the curve. So I think that's incredibly important. All right, let's talk about GIP3. I'm going to throw this up on the screen here. And this is very timely because the voting for this improvement proposal actually opened today, and it goes through August 20th. So if you want to speak to this, but it's essentially you guys are looking to launch cross-chain compatibility with Solana.
Yes, sir. And I'm very excited about it. Solana has done an amazing job building up a huge DePIN community, and we want to be able, people in the Solana community, to be able to access the GOD token easily and directly to use it, as we just talked about. Using the Geodnet service and directly involves acquiring GOD tokens and burning them. So in order to continue the decentralization and make that as flexible as possible, it's important for us to be where other DePIN projects want to build. And the marketplace has shown that Solana is very attractive. We also see the high TPS, the focus on mobile. I think the focus on mobile is a huge selling point to us that Solana has been doing with the Saga phone. It is a great place to be able to get GOD tokens, working and have the overall project benefit from that DePIN community there.
Are you working with, or are you planning to work with any specific DePIN projects that are built on Solana today?
Yeah, we've already, already announced that we're working with Natix, who is building on Solana, and we are also working with Wingbits, and so they're building on Solana. So those are two that I can mention. I think there are a couple more in the pipe that are exciting, but certainly, we think that that's and we're working with the Saga phone directly. So we will have a dedicated Saga phone app. We talked about this in our last AMA. It's going to be really neat. It's going to involve, it's going to create some interesting data for the Geodnet network, and it's also going to involve using the phone in novel ways for positioning and coordinated activity between multiple holders of the phones for rewards. So I think that that's just a lot of stuff going on in Solana. We think Polygon is great too. They're great projects in DePIN and Polygon. We've been incredibly happy with the support we've gotten from the Polygon team, and it's been a super reliable, great blockchain for us to build on, and we plan to continue to operate the token on the Polygon chain as well. So this is really about building a what's called in the wormhole context, they call it a native token transfer bridge. So you'll be able to go back and forth between the GOD on Solana and the GOD on Polygon seamlessly. And so that, I think, is great. We have a precedent with this. We've already done that with IOTEX. So there's a GOD token on the IOTEX chain, and that's worked really well. And IOTEX as well has a great DePIN community. We participate in all their real world events. We've learned a lot from the team. They invested in us in the very early days of the project. And so these kinds of cooperations between Web3 projects, I think, are super, super all boats, rise together type of thing. I think there is really good synergy in it. We're not, all at each other's throats in blockchain. We're really what we're trying to do is solve real world problems and bring the world to a better place. A lot of the traditional solutions just sort of suck. And I don't know anyone who hasn't been censored or hasn't experienced some sort of difficulty with Web 2 platforms in the last 12 months. It's just constant.
True.
And Web 3 is really the only solution to that. There is no other way that we will ever break free of this sort of constant quagmire of problems that the sort of super dominated Web 2 marketplace has.
I couldn't agree more. And I mean, look, as far as this improvement proposal goes, it seems like it makes sense on a lot of different levels, and it's going to also get you access to more liquidity over in the Solana ecosystem. Absolutely. This is open until August 20th. So I started today. It's me running for a while here. If you have a stake in a Geodnet out, get in here, make sure
Be
you
there and vote. Yeah, absolutely. It looks like it's a close race so far, although only a tiny number of people have voted so far. But it's interesting to see these things. So we got to get to 2008 votes, and off the bat, it seems it's a kind of a even Steven horse race. So we'll see. I think it's a good thing. I would really encourage those who have VE NFT. Either through either through earning NFT or through the staking or the locked tokens, to vote in favor of the proposal. I think it will be very positive. I think it will help adoption of our protocol within other Web3 protocols, which I think will help bring visibility to the project. I think it will help with liquidity, as you mentioned. And, I think that Solana, DePIN on Solana has been a huge hit. You cannot deny that. That is a super and huge credit to the team. Our interactions with the Solana Foundation team have been all very positive. They have not been pushy. They have been supportive on technical questions, supportive on thoughtful ways to get this done. Really can't say enough good things. And in general, my interaction with most everyone in the crypto community on the technical side and on the foundation side has been really positive. I think that, there's just a lot of good stuff going on. Just give it a little bit of time, and DePIN and many new use cases of blockchain are going to emerge that are very positive.
I agree. And I think that you all are doing a great job leading the way and showing that, revenue can really be generated in the DePIN space. Because I think we're still, at this point where there's a lot of projects that are bringing on supply with tokens, but you guys are really pushing the envelope when it comes to utilization of the network in real revenue and all the partnerships that you have. I mean, it's been quite impressive, and I'm really excited to see more partnerships announced. I know you're out there. We talked a little bit about your travel schedule coming up. I mean, man, you're on the road constantly, just forming new partnerships, but also pushing the project forward in a lot of different ways, going to all the different, speaker events, et cetera, and getting the name out there as well, which is just as important, I would say. So we covered a lot, obviously, but, as we get to the end here, I would love to open the door for you to talk about, any goals that you have, over the next year, 2 years. I mean, looking further out as far as, it could be deployments, could be revenue, partnerships, and then any other, big developments coming down the pipe that you might be able to speak to that haven't been widely announced yet?
I think that certainly growing the revenue is the top priority. I think that has to be because there's been, and I think that a lot of the DePIN projects are going to do well on revenue. I'm actually pretty optimistic in discussions we have with other teams that revenue is going to come around on a lot of these because they're solving real world problems in very efficient and good ways. I think what really caused some of that is that things happened very fast in the first wave of DePIN, and they weren't necessarily thought out to create well-structured outcomes. And the Web2 customers will not pay for things that are not useful. So that's a reality. And so if you set up your initial tokenomics a little bit wrong, or kind of got caught up in a cycle and things weren't deployed effectively, then I think you can fall into that trap. But I think that this newer wave is being a bit more disciplined on that. Our case is really strong because of the standards and because of the pain point with the existing solutions. So we're thrilled to be able to push that. But revenue is absolutely the number one priority. Going to a lot of events in the sectors that we serve to showcase our solution, to meet with customers. Customers take time. You've got to get them through the trial phase. You got to get them testing. You got to work out how they're going to integrate it and commercially roll it out. It does take time to build up, but it's coming. And so that's our top focus. I would put on the thing that we don't talk about as much, but I think is super important. definitely less accepted thesis in DePIN, but we think it's very important, is full decentralization. So we're doing this step by step by step. The big step that we added recently is a governance platform. We're doing another big step that's in the works that we have not talked about much, which is we're making it much easier to do the decentralized burning of the token, so that we're trying to push this buyback and burn mechanism as close to the end user, to the originating point as possible. And David's team has been building out infrastructure to do that through the Uniswap API. In order to make that happen, we'll obviously have to also do some tooling for the Solana chain for that. But we're making that easier and more decentralized. We want to get the rewards distribution to work in a decentralized way. We think that's quite crucial long term, because we don't really know where the regulatory picture goes. We think that that helps with that. We also think that it helps a lot with censorship resistance and robustness. And God almighty, I mean, every day you read about something where you're just like, I mean, yesterday, right, the whole thing, I was talking to my friend who uses Schwab, and he's like, I can't get into my Schwab. And you're like, really? I mean, yesterday's sell-off, it was big and bad, but it wasn't of any sort of epic scale. And we're saying you can't get into your thing. I don't know if this is, who knows? You could easily tin hat it and come up with a conspiracy theory, but that's a form of censorship. When you can't access your Schwab account on a day of high market volatility, that's pretty FUBAR.
Yeah.
And it was like 5 platforms or whatever that had that happen to it. Like the DeFi. Right?
Exactly.
DeFi was working just fine,
Yeah.
So I think that decentralization is key. Geospatial data, there is some level of censorship in it, not a lot. When you go to mapping, oh boy, mapping, when you talk about real maps, like street maps and stuff, there's a ton of censorship. So I think it's important for protocols involved in the mapping space to think about that, think about the decentralization there. Still need to obey the regulatory rules, but if a framework and technology is built that is censorship resistant and becomes the dominant solution, then eventually a lot of these things will cave, and it'll cave in a way that is actually beneficial for everybody to have data that's true and accurate and transparent, as opposed to essentially this gigantic bullshit factory that we live in today. It's
true.
It's true, man.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely spot on, man. I saw that too with the pullback in the market. Obviously, there's stuff going on with the Japan, raising their rates and cause that sell off, amongst other things, the weak job reports and et cetera. But yeah, to have 5 different platforms down at the same time seemed a little odd. But like DeFi does fix that, to your point. Any other, announcements? I mean, I assume you guys have some big stuff coming soon. I mean, you guys always do.
We're going, the next big thing for us. I'm going out this weekend to Escape Velocity's DePIN Summit. I'll be on a panel there. I'm super excited to see fellow DePIN founders and investors, and just see what other people are thinking and feeling, especially with the volatility in the market. It'll be very interesting discussions. And then our next big event is the commercial UAV show in Las Vegas, Nevada, first week of September. We will have some announcements there that are quite exciting, both on the Web3 and the Web2 side relative to the drone space. And then after that, I think it's Token 2049. We'll have a couple of announcements there that we're fired up about, including some more things on the mobile app. And hopefully, knock on wood, the GIP3 passes, because that's a key part of our hopes and expectations, is to be able to move that forward. Following that will be at Intergeo in Stuttgart, which is one of the world's largest, probably the world's largest high-end geospatial event. Really, everybody, our Web2 counterparts or competitors, if you will, they have 40 meter by 40 meter multi-story booths at this thing. I mean, it's a huge event covering all aspects of mapping, surveying, drone inspection, a lot of stuff there, a lot of solutions there, all based on precise location technology. So we'll be at that event, and then a bunch more into October. So it will be busy.
You got quite the schedule coming up. I don't know when you sleep, man. But I tell you, I appreciate the work ethic, and it shows through. I mean, the project has been incredibly successful. Sounds like there's a lot more success coming. And Like after sitting down with you at Consensus, I was already really excited about the project, but leaving Consensus, I was like, man, I couldn't believe all the things that you guys were working on. And it's been incredible. And I've been excited to get you on. So I appreciate you taking the time to join today. I would love to do it again soon as, you have more
Sounds
developments and things to talk about.
We look forward to that too. I think that the communication that you do and the in-depth studies are very, very good. And I do appreciate all the folks that create content. I think it's hard work, and I think it really helps make the entire Web3 ecosystem work, particularly in DePIN. Super critical. All these projects are a little bit more complex than the they're complicated. I mean, realistically, they take some time to understand, and so it's fantastic to be on your show to help explain and help spread the word.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it can be complex. I did put a deep dive on your project. I think, my goal is to do everything I can to get awareness in the space, but also make it easy for people to understand. Because I believe we are at this inflection point where we're starting to see, mass adoption in the crypto space, and I think the sectors that have true utility and use cases that make sense to non-crypto people are going to do the best. And I think DePIN is going to be, one of the leading sectors in the crypto space. So the more people I can tell about it, the better. We're at an exciting time right now. So I think Geodnet is going to be, already is one of those leading projects, but I think you guys are going to be a good example of how to run a successful DePIN project. So thanks again, Mike. And, we'll have to do it again sometime, but I really appreciate the time.
Take care, Bradley. Thanks so much.
Thanks.